Perez?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Remmer. I've been very cautious over the last year and a half that this file has come to Borough Council a number of times for a number of reasons. The one is I really didn't want to add oil to the fire. Obviously, I'm an openly observant Jew. I didn't want to have any of my interventions to be interpreted or necessarily add oil to the fire as being someone who, by perception, would perhaps have a certain predisposition in favor of a certain project that, by association, has a religious institution of which I share the faith. What I have seen over the last year and a half is an evolution of the public debate over the project. If you take a look at the interventions, at the procès-verbaux, initially there was a strong opposition to Chabad. There was a strong opposition, and it was presented as a nuisance factor, as an institution that did not respect the regulations, the one that caused a lot of unwanted elements in the neighborhood. And what we started seeing after a certain while is that there was supporters of Chabad that started coming out, and supporters of Chabad that started coming to Borough Council and sending emails and making phone calls. And slowly but surely, we also saw a change in terms of the comments regarding the project. It was less and less about Chabad, and it was more and more about the patrimonial value. Some individuals brought that from the very beginning, it's true. But when you look at the documentation that was brought and presented to Borough Council, you can see a shift in the kind of arguments. Eventually, that became more and more. There was a very unfortunate incident that occurred during the public consultation. There were people who obviously very rightfully are able to bring their position and their point of view on the aspect of the impact of having a institution on a residential street. What I find, and what I'm pointing out are just observations and facts. We've had a church who was on Hingston for how many years? For how many decades?
100, almost
100 years. And went about its routine, and as far as I know, didn't create any kind of ruckus, didn't create any kind of opposition. Perhaps they weren't as active as what Chabad has been doing, because it's more than just a religious institution, also has social activities. But we didn't hear any kind of opposition. Couldn't be that there was less impact, but that's a fact. Until this project came along, we didn't hear anything about this. When we started hearing some of these nuisance elements, we started hearing people who started bringing certain facts, certain things, how they were renting out the hall, how they were having barbecues, and how it was a danger. I was curious. I went to see some of these things that were presented. I went to see the Facebook. I remember one individual saying that it was a security risk, that they're having burning marshmallows at a sukkah party because it was a risk. And I went to see what it was on their Facebook page. And all it was is a little Hashabi barbecue with a few kids warming up a marshmallow. And it was presented as a real dire risk from a security perspective and from a nuisance perspective. I think that we cannot and should not start judging the perceptions and the intentions of individuals. That is a very dangerous thing to do in a democratic society. I don't think we should either be naive and to push under the rug certain things. We're all intelligent individuals. We're all sophisticated individuals. We should also be careful not to brush everybody, with the same paint. A decision has been made. We are a society of laws. We are a society that respects laws, and we have to do so. And as much as we'd like to, on a borough, perhaps go forward with this referendum, from a practical perspective, it doesn't make sense. We can perhaps take the position from a principal position that, yes, well, let's push it forward on a democratic basis, and let's see what happens. I think that would be counterproductive. I share Mayor Coatman's perspective that from a community perspective, from a civic relations perspective, it would be counterproductive. Very little will come out of this. What I do find is that on the substance of this file, there's a great loss for the community. There's a great loss because there is an abandoned church that's not going to be renovated, that's not going to be used. We start seeing a shift of concerns now about the upkeep of the church, of respecting of regulations. And it's our obligation as a public court to ensure that and to ensure to do that. I hope that we have the same diligence and we have the same rigor with respect to any abandoned building. And let's not focus on one. I think that's also very telling. It's also ensuring how many, if we have this real concern about patrimonial architecture, then let's hear about the other ones. I'm not saying I'm going to agree with everybody, but let's not focus on one specific situation. I understand why we had to, because there was a decision that had to be made. But if this is just about the project, if this is just about this specific building, and if it's not about community relations or religious relations or community relations, then I hope that everybody who is as interested about St. Columbus Church will be interested about other churches, and we'll hear them speak about those buildings as well. I'm almost finished. I believe in always being an open mind. Those who know me over the last 6 years, who's been in public service, in public office, I think could always, or I challenge anybody to find an indication where I specifically advantage one group over another for reasons other than on its own merits. I believe that there is a risk with the failing of this project that Chabad might have to leave. That is a reality. Chabad might have to leave because it's a tenant, and if the current owner decides to sell the property, well, they might have to leave. Is that part of the plan? I have no idea. I don't know the lease that they have. I don't know if it's registered. I don't know what kind of long-term relationships they have with their landlord. But that is a risk, and that would be a loss for NDG and for the Jewish community and Chabad community of NDG. I will close by saying that I take serious offense by the comments of my colleague, Mr. Cyril, when he talked to Mr. Adam Atlas, which I do know, talking about the Jewish guilt argument. I think it's totally inappropriate. I think individuals are allowed to speak about their perception, their experience, and not it being relegated to some kind of Jewish guilt argument. I think it's totally inappropriate and inaccurate. Thank you. Merci.
Alors, collègues, on est rendu à légèrement passer les 90 minutes. Je vous remercie pour votre patience.